From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
A nearly $14 billion state budget is now law. But the process of getting there was, as usual, a bumpy road, including a last-minute about-face over a tax break to ensure Citizens Bank didn't move out of Rhode Island. The 2024 legislative session also saw significant reform to the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights and the passage of another suite of housing bills, including the long-sought expansion of accessory dwelling units. This week on Newsmakers, we break it all down with the man at the center of the action, our guest, Rhode Island House Speaker Joe Shekarchi. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White, alongside 12 News Politics editor Ted Nesi, House Speaker Joe Shekarchi. Welcome back to the program, and congratulations on getting to the finish line.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to come on your show, both of you gentlemen, and I'm happy to be here. And yes, it's congratulations, because it was a little bit of a bumpy landing, but we brought the plane down and there were no casualties.
It always, it always is. Well, let's start with one of those bumps, Citizens Bank. The governor added a budget amendment late that would have benefited Citizens and other banks. Then you said it wasn't going to be in the budget. Sure enough, it wasn't in the House version. Then the following Monday, it was back on the fast track as a standalone bill. What happened?
It's a little bit more detailed than that. I'll be happy to break it down. So there was a bill that was introduced early in the session. Chairman Solomon had a bill that would change the tax structure for all financial institutions. Obviously, Citizens would have benefited, and obviously they were the catalyst for that. The governor had been working and was working with Citizens since December or January regarding this tax restructuring, if you will. I asked the governor if it was close, they had a deal with Citizens. He indicated to me that he did, and he proposed a budget article. That budget article was presented before the House Finance Committee. What was telling to me at the time is Citizens did not support that article. And that grew concern to me. Citizens then, through their representatives and some of their executives, came to see me literally 23 hours before I was launching the budget, and they wanted an amendment to the article. I did not feel comfortable amending the article, and I asked specifically, does the governor support this amendment? And they said no. And I said, does taxation support this amendment? And they said no. And they wanted me to do that, and I said, well, I really don't feel comfortable. I didn't really have time with less than 23 hours to go. The budget, as you know, is a very large document. It's a blueprint. I needed to do my own analysis, and I said I don't have time to that. And the Citizens made it clear to me at that time, in a very professional and polite way, but they made it clear that if I didn't do the amendment to the article, don't bother doing the article. And I didn't do the article. I said at that time...
But then something changed.
Well, no, nothing changed, because I said at the same time that I did not want to be the speaker that lost Citizens Bank, and I said there is a standalone bill, and I will continue to work with them. And once it became... or actually, once it was not in the budget, it became a lot more urgent for all the parties involved. I worked for 2 weekends in a row with the governor's office and the Citizens people, and really give a lot of credit to the governor's chief of staff, Tony Alfonso, who did a phenomenal job with taxation to bring Citizens and their positions together. And they coalesced and where they agreed. So what you saw was the revival, if you will, or the reincarnation or the continuation of Chairman Solomon's bill that was restructuring. The governor supported it, Citizens supported it, and most importantly for me, taxation supported it. And that's when I felt that we could bring it before the House for a full vote. And it had a vetting, and it was overwhelmingly supported. I think it was 69-2.
Okay, did Citizens say to you or anyone in your orbit at any point, look, if this doesn't happen, we're gone?
They didn't say it as directly as that. They told me that Governor Healey had 2 proposals on the table for them to relocate to Massachusetts. One was a deal in the greater Boston area. One of them was anywhere in Massachusetts. That was clearly on the table, and Governor Healey was courting Citizens to relocate to Massachusetts.
Really? They had approached them, Citizens told you?
Yes.
Massachusetts about
Many different Citizens representatives, and Citizens executives told me that. That is correct.
And you didn't want to call that bluff?
I didn't want to call a bluff. I didn't think it was right to call the bluff. I wanted tax parity. In other words, a lot of states tax financial institutions the same way we did. If you go back, and we'll talk about the building for a minute, a lot of people said, you know, you stopped the building.
Just to pause it to make sure people are keeping up with us. So there was the tax change we've been talking about.
Yep.
Then it got kind of tied up in the public conversation with this effort by the McKee administration to buy a building Citizens owns to turn into state offices in East Providence, even though they were separate issues, but get kind of lumped together in the discussion.
That's exactly correct. And that particular deal, to me, clearly did not have enough vetting. It did not have really enough explanation to the general public and to my caucus. There was no support at all in the House for that purchase of that building at this time. And I made it very clear that we were not going to consider it in this session. And I encouraged everyone else, if that's where they want to go in terms of the administration, citizens needed much more transparency and needed a lot more, and they understood that. I think ultimately the governor supported my decision not to move forward with that. I think it was the right decision at this time. But when we talk about citizens, we're also talking about all financial institutions in Rhode Island. There are over 40 banks in Rhode Island, so we wanted to be on parity. Citizens was paying a certain level of taxes for approximately the last 9 years, and then they fell because of COVID. That's what they told me, and I believe them. Because of COVID, they fell out of that jobs development program, and their taxes, in essence, doubled. And they, a publicly traded organization, they have an obligation to their shareholders. They were going to pay double taxes if they stayed in Rhode Island. And they were the ones who, earlier in the session, and even late last year, wanted a restructuring of the tax. That could have been done potentially by the administration internally without the need of legislation. But ultimately, it was felt by everybody involved that needed legislation, which I'm okay with because it's a public process. People will have input. The media knows what's going on. It doesn't look like it was a change for one institution or one organization or one company. So I'm okay with legislation as long as I could feel that the governor was on board with it, Division of Taxation was on board with it. And I have faith and confidence in the House Finance Committee. They did a thorough job of vetting it, and my House fiscal staff as well.
Just one more question on the citizens thing. I don't want to belabor this, but I was with you the night you unveiled the budget, and I was surprised when you said citizens wasn't going in, regardless of the details, just because they're a big employer. They seem to care a lot about this. That's not the sort of thing you usually would play loose with, having them go. When you sounded like, if I heard you right, you thought this would be something you'd work on in the off session. Maybe it would happen early next year, and then it moved much more quickly. Yeah. So did something change in your mind?
No, they changed. They, meaning the administration and Citizens, Tony Alfonso, the people from Citizens began to work, and they've kept me abreast of everything that was going on. So it's not unusual that I tricked Ted Nesi on a budget night, especially when it's his birthday, but I take credit for that, so I enjoy that opportunity. But I will tell you, as I'm committed to work, regardless if it's off session or weekends or whatever, I worked all last session on LIBOR, not outside of the public eye and the media, but we had numerous meetings all last summer on LIBOR. So I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves and get the job done, and I wanted citizens to understand that. Just because, and the tax change that we were talking about that ultimately passed, and I believe the governor will sign into law next week, does not go into effect until January 1st. So I thought there was time. I even thought there was time. I talked about publicly through you or other media that I would have no problem calling a special session if we needed one in the fall to ratify this, if we came to an agreement. But they worked hard. They wanted it done. The administration wanted it done. I want to congratulate Governor McKee, and I want to congratulate citizens for rolling up their sleeves and working. I was at the State House Sunday night working on the Citizens deal just before it became public.
We have a little over a minute before we have to get to a break here. So just a broader budget question here. The last time we had you on the program, January, beginning of the session, and you were very doom and gloom and talking about belt tightening with the budget and all of that. Not only did you not tighten the belt, you had to add a couple of notches to it because the budget, it grew. Should we expect a much bigger deficit going into the next year?
I don't think so. Let's go back to January.
It was already at what, 250 million estimated before?
So let's explain what happened. So people
within a minute.
Okay, within a minute. That we were looking at revenue numbers that were based in November and the governor's budget and the amount of asks that I had. But when we had our final revenue numbers in May, we had significant savings. Our caseloads were down. Our income taxes were up. The sales tax were up. We had revenue, extra revenue, and we had a need. And where that money went into programs that we had already committed to fund for next year. So I'm not necessarily concerned, and we can get into that maybe in the next segment, because I know you had Chairman DePalma here, and he was talking about the Medicaid amount of money that we put in, the extra amount of money we put in. We have already committed to spend that money next year. So we spent it a little bit earlier, but the good thing about that is that for every dollar we put in, we get $2 back in federal assistance. That will help the Rhode Island economy. It will help the most vulnerable, disabled, elderly, our children. That's where that money goes into. And those workers who take care of them. We'll now have more money. It'll stabilize that part of the healthcare system and the needy, and also will pay taxes into our economy.
All right, we'll continue this conversation on the other side of the break. Our guest is House Speaker Joe Shekarchi. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. This is Ted Nesi. Our guest this week is House Speaker Joe Shekarchi. Ted?
All right, heavy first segment with all that bank tax talk. So let's talk about politics a little bit, something a little more tangible for people. This was your 4th session as Speaker. As far as I can tell, there's no big rebellion underway in the House, and you're in pretty safe hands.
Not yet.
I know, it can change fast. How long do you see yourself doing this job?
A little bit longer. I still have a passion for the job. I enjoy it very much. I'm running for re-election. Hopefully I'll be re-elected by my constituents in Warwick. And then I will ask my colleagues to support me again in January. And if they do, I take life one term at a time, and I'll be in the next General Assembly session, hopefully as Speaker.
Do you want Chris Blazewski to succeed you someday?
Absolutely, 100% yes, without hesitation. Chris has been he's very talented. He's been very loyal. He has been my right hand, and he is involved in every single decision that the House makes. I include him in everything, every budget article, every discussion, every political thing, every policy issue. Chris has been right there by my side, and he is an invaluable friend as well.
I've asked you before if you might run for governor in 26 if Governor McKee doesn't run. You've said yes. I assume that hasn't changed.
Yeah, I would look
might,
at. I would. The answer is might, and I would look at that absolutely. I'd look at whatever's available, and I also could look at going back into a private sector and enjoying my life again. And then I wouldn't have to come on your show with you guys.
We might bring you on.
It depends.
We bring you on as a political analyst. That might be good. One last politics question. Senate President Ruggiero. We all know he's been struggling with his health. He's acknowledged that. You've been pretty supportive of him, trying to help him as he gets through it. I think a lot of us watching more distantly than you get to see wonder, is he still able to do the job? Is it creating issues with governance because of his absences and everything? What have you seen up close?
I have, first of all, no matter what you hear and what you see, I call him Donnie, or the president, he's been very engaged. He really has. I have had numerous conversations with him. I've met with him in North Providence a couple of times through the budget process, through the legislative process. I've had numerous phone calls. He's been very alert, very engaged, very much on top of his game. Sometimes physically he's not at the State House, but he did return at the end of session. I was happy to see that. But he's been, this budget has just as much Senate input as all the others. This legislative session had a lot of Senate, asks in there and a lot of Senate successes. He has been very engaged. His Chief of Staff, John Fleming, has done a phenomenal job for him and the Senate. This was his first year as Chief of Staff. I found him a perfect gentleman. We didn't agree on every single bill, and that's the nature of the business. But I will tell you that, the Senate President is still very much on top of his game legislatively.
An amendment to a law that would make the public's ability to access government and the work that it does failed. Disclosure. Again. Yep. Repeatedly. And
yes.
Disclosure.
And it's your baby. You're on the board that
I was on the board of the New England First Amendment Coalition that pushed to amendment. Didn't even get to the House floor. And I should mention it's the Access to Public Records Act. Look, this sends a signal to advocates who want to increase transparency in government and the public that this is not important to you or to other lawmakers. Are they wrong?
Yes.
Okay, tell me why.
Because I would reverse it on the advocates who want this, and I will tell you as much as you want it, and the people who are there, which is, Steve Brown from the ACLU and John Marion, and I met with them, and I told them this is the path if you want to see success on this bill. You need to work the process. Look, we talked, at least in the beginning, in the opening segment, we talked about ADUs. ADUs, I'm the Speaker of the House. ADUs took me 3 years to get through the General Assembly. I will tell you, and all the advocates, don't give up. I will tell you to engage.
For the record, it's been 12 years since that law has been amended. So. Okay,
I know, but I think I only remember the last 2 years that I've been Speaker.
Yeah, there's been a new push under De Palma and
the last 2 years, De Palma, Serpa, and Solomon. Those are
Solomon's had one too.
That's the last 2 years. This is, for me, the third year. That you need to address the reasons. You had 22 departments opposing this. You had the League of Cities and Towns opposing it, and a lot of cities and towns opposing this. So I would tell you to engage the people who are opposing this. Find out, see if there's a middle ground, see if you can work on this. There is a lot of issues regarding this. Number one, I will tell you that since I've been Speaker, we've had several requests of JCLS, the Joint Committee on Legislative Affairs, for information. We have provided them to everybody, and we have not charged anybody. I have waived those fees for every news organization that has asked for it. We put everything in the General Assembly online, at least in the House. We're very transparent, we're very open, and I'm proud of that fact. And what I would tell you and every advocate who wants to engage the people who are opposing it, have you talked to any of the department directors who are opposing this? Have you talked to the League of Cities and Towns? Have you gone and see how this is also in some communities been abused? And also, which no one really seems to forget, a lot of private companies use this APA request to get information and then repackage it and sell it. So what I would tell you is there's a middle ground here, and you need to find the middle ground, and you need to work with the people who are opposing it. Maybe you can make a requirement that this cannot be used for commercial purposes. Maybe you can limit it to so many asks per year free, and then you would pay for it. I mean, there's a lot of middle ground here, and you need to work the middle ground, just like every other advocacy, everyone else. And I respect the fact that you're journalists and you want this information. From my point of view as Speaker in the House,
well, it's not just journalists. This is a law for the public.
I understand, but
we frame it as that.
So you have a lot of opposition to it. So my question is, why do you have so much opposition, and what have you done to mitigate that or meet in the middle with the opposition? Okay. And I say that to everybody, by the way. It's not just you. It's everyone, every organization, everyone who comes forward looking for funds or legislation. I like to work on a collaborative approach.
About a minute left, Speaker, in this segment. We look ahead to next year. If you are so lucky to be reelected and become House Speaker again, we'll put that caveat in.
You're right.
Is there a bill, is there a topic that you're seeing start to bubble up that you think is going to be a big topic of conversation, something that's going to take up a lot of time next year that you're starting to hear from the caucus?
You know, all stuff, you know, every session is different. Every session has things that you don't anticipate. But the traditional stuff, the budget, and of course, everybody looking for funding in the budget, that's always a concern of where we are. You mentioned that, you know, where our revenue numbers come in at, we'll see. No particular things that I haven't seen or heard before. I mean, there will always be some things that'll happen. I didn't expect citizens to be an issue for the General Assembly. That came in very at the end. Also, what came in at the end, you know, the statute of limitations bill regarding the Washington Bridge. I think you'll see that come back. Also, there was a bill called P3, PPP, public-private partnerships. That came in late. Those are very, you know, important issues with need a lot more vetting and a lot more input from the departments. Those issues will return. You know, it takes a long time. The way our system of government nationally and also
like 20 seconds here
locally, I said it takes a long time. You say I have 20 seconds left. Things take time to be exposed and to be worked on and to come to the General Assembly. Very few things pass the first time and right away, especially significant things.
All right, we're going to take a break on the program. Again, our guest is House Speaker Joe Shekarchi. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Ted Nesi. Our guest is House Speaker Joe Shekarchi. Speaker, we had on Governor Dan McKee on 12 News at 4 this week, and anchor Kim Kalunian asked him about the stack of bills that he has on his desk. Take a listen.
Is there anything that's coming to your desk that you plan to veto?
Not at the moment. I think that generally our legislative staff really works closely with the House, and there's a lot of meetings that they have. But also I'm able to have meetings with the Senate President and the Speaker through session, kind of ironing out certain things and giving my point of view, and they listen.
All right, well, Speaker, look, Ted and I have covered Rhode Island politics for a while now, and I have to tell you, this does not sound like the Raimondo Mattiello State House. It doesn't sound like the Kachiri Murphy State House. Is it healthy to not have at least some tension between the two branches of government?
Well, we do have tension, and we don't
see it.
That's, you know, that's by design. I don't like to air out the dirty laundry in public. I mean, but the point is that, you know, respectfully, my good friend, the Senate President, and I, we don't agree on all bills. I mean, he had a bill that was
I'm asking you about
the governor. The same thing. I mean, if you look at his budget, there was, you know, some significant changes from what he proposed and then what we ultimately, you know, passed in the House. But it's about respect to individuals, and I will tell you that I have a great relationship. I try to have a great relationship with everybody, including including my friends in the media, for that matter. But the reality is, the governor has a job to do constitutionally, and as we do in the House. And some of his priorities are not necessarily priorities of the House. If you look at the amount of education spending, we increased the governor's education spending by over $71 million. That was significant. We made significant changes in his budget because that's what my caucus wanted. That's what the membership wanted after listening to the advocates and going through a public process. And we don't agree on a lot of bills, and he has vetoed bills in the past. We've overrode some of them. Some have been sustained. I expect, in spite of what he said, that there will be a veto or two. There usually is.
Do you know what?
No, I'm sure there are. I'm sure there will be some because that's just the nature of the business. But overall, I think the best thing to get along is always communication. And I will tell you that, as the governor said, we do have meetings weekly, the Senate President, the governor, and I, and we have meetings. Our staffs, the chiefs of staffs, have meetings separate apart from us. And I think communication is healthy and it's good. It doesn't mean that I rubber stamp everything he does or he rubber stamps everything I do. We listen, we get along. Sometimes we don't get along. Sometimes we agree. Sometimes we don't agree. But I just think it's healthy communication, and it's the way the process should work. And I think, to be honest with you, it's what the people of Rhode Island want to see. They want to see, regardless if you're a conservative or a progressive or a Democrat, Republican, that you get along well. And I'm equally proud of that every one of my budgets have been bipartisan, and I enjoy a very good relationship with Leader Chippendale and the Republicans, and even for that matter, Leader De La Cruz in the Senate as well. So I think that's important for the people. That's how you get things done.
We only have about 2 minutes left, Speaker.
It goes by so fast.
It goes by very fast. You mentioned it earlier. You got your accessory dwelling units bill that you've wanted, and as you said, even as Speaker, it took a while.
3 years.
Get that. 3 years. Can you summarize for a regular homeowner, property owner out there watching, what can they actually do once that bill is presumably signed that they can't do now?
What they can do is they can add an accessory dwelling unit, a granny flat, an in-law apartment, or convert a garage into a home, or in Mayor De Silva's his she shed into a dwelling unit. But you still need to meet all of the local requirements, and what it would make is the process easier. It doesn't automatically grant it. You still have setback requirements. You're still going to have your water and your sewer connections and capacity. You have to meet all of those requirements.
And who can live there, right?
Anybody can live there. A dwelling. It's not limited to a relative. It could be anybody.
And that's what it was before, limited to a relative. And
no,
now
every community had different rules, and there was no owner-occupied requirement that I'm aware of statewide before that. But if you look around the country, this has had tremendous success in opening up additional units of housing, private sector housing production. In California, particularly San Diego County, it's a huge success. And also, we were talking about Governor Healy earlier. She has her own ADU bill in Massachusetts. She's emulated a lot of what we've done here in Rhode Island regarding housing, and she's trying to use the same ideas in Massachusetts, and I congratulate her. One other point regarding housing.
20 seconds again.
20 seconds. 20 seconds happens off.
You're using it up right now.
The number one issue of all 50 states when they met with Governor McKee met with the president and all the governors associations in Washington earlier this year. All 50 states, red and blue, housing, number one issue.
House Speaker Joe Shekarchi, thanks so much. If you missed any of it, it's on WPRI.com. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week.
We have to have a longer show here. We got to get.